The registry hall at Kepler Junction smelled of scorched coffee and tired rules. Selene Tenora stood under lights so bright they leached the color from her skin, turning her usual lilac hue to ash. In her hands, she held a bouquet of synthetic roses, crimson petals engineered never to wilt. The protocol unit that had pressed them into her arms had done it with cheerful efficiency, as if permanence was a kindness. Selene found it cruel. 34 steps to the exit. She'd counted them once, then again, like numbers could become a door. Her hair fell loose past her shoulders. Gold against lavender, an open violation of Vallanti custom for an unbonded woman. Custom had stopped protecting anyone's sex standard weeks ago. When the Terran colonial authorities seized the Tenora family's mining allotment on Rustridge, 3 generations of digging a life out of iron sand erased with one foreclosure stamp. Her grandfather's hands had bled for those claims. Her father's voice had broken fighting for them. And then paper, ink, a signature, across the podium. The man who had signed nothing and yet owned everything waited with a miner's stillness. Dorian Holden, 50 to by Terran count, wore his years like scar tissue earned, not inherited. His hair was dark with silver threaded through it, cut short and practical. His face had the weathered planes of someone who'd spent too many mornings squinting into glare and too many nights staring at rock redouts. A long brown coat hung off his shoulders, scuffed at the hem, the kind of garment that didn't survive its owner by accident. He owned the largest independent mining outfit in the Kepler sector, 12,000 hectares of the best ground on a planet called Siltspire, and, according to the contract Selene had been forced to sign, he owned her. The broker Castian Day had arrived at her family's habitat like a carrion bird that heard a heart stop beating. He'd spoken smoothly, of mutual benefit, of honorable arrangements. He'd explained that Mr. Holden needed a wife. He'd explained that the Tenoras needed their debts cleared, or the authority would strip them of their remaining rights and leave them with nothing but a pressurized coffin and a view of rust. Her father, Councillor Vero Tenora, had cried. While he transmitted the agreement, he'd transmitted it anyway. No one had asked Selene what she wanted. A registry official in a grey uniform didn't look up from his terminal. State your intention for the record. Dorian cleared his throat when he spoke. His voice carried the grit of asteroid dust and hard mornings. I will honor this. Bond, not I do. I will. Selene's inner eyelids flickered an involuntary stress response she hated. In Vallanti phrasing, I do was fact. I will was effort, a promise, not a claim. The official finally lifted his gaze. Impatience sharpened into boredom. And you? Selene's tongue felt too large for her mouth. I consent to this registration, she managed. The official tapped his screen. Bond recorded. Congratulations. Next. That was it. No ritual. No witnesses beyond Castian Day's pleased smile and a government clerk who already wanted the next name. By Terran law, Selene Tenora was now Selene Holden, legally bonded to a human stranger who could, if he chose, use the law like a leash. Dorian offered his arm. Selene stared at it as if it might burn her. The shuttle's ready, he said quietly, 6 hours down to the ranch. You can sleep. She placed her fingers on his sleeve with all the enthusiasm of someone handling venom. Under the worn fabric, his arm was steady. He didn't grip her, didn't tug, didn't claim. He simply stood there present, as if he understood the difference between possession and proximity. They walked toward the docking ring. Cassian slid into step beside them, voice oily, low, and pleased with itself. "You've made a fine purchase, Holden," he purred. "Vallanti women are renowned, graceful, and I've heard they're very. Your fee's been transferred." Dorian cut in. One sentence, sharpened like a blade. "We're finished." Cassian's smile didn't shift. "Merely making conversation. Though, if you find the arrangement unsatisfactory, I also provide." Dorian stopped walking. His voice dropped into something dangerously calm. "Leave my sight before I decide your fee should cover my medical expenses. After I use your face to test how hard station decking is, for the first time." Cassian's smile cracked. He disappeared into the crowd like a man suddenly aware of his own fragility. Selene exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The shuttle was a converted cargo holoplane, clean, built for utility over comfort. Dorian led her to a private cabin with a real bed. He pointed to the door. A thick metal deadbolt sat above the latch. "Physical," he said, "not electronic. Can't be overridden from outside." He paused, then added, "Use it." Selene stared at him, trying to find the trick. "You haven't eaten," Dorian continued, as if recommending locks to a terrified bride was normal. "There's food in the galley. I'll be in the cockpit. We don't have to talk until you're ready." Then he left. Selene locked the deadbolt immediately. The click was loud in the small cabin. She sat on the bed and stared at her hands for fingers, a thumb, and the extra joint that made Vallanti dexterity famous. Her grandmother used to say hands revealed character. Right now, hers revealed only fear through the narrow viewport. The station fell away. Stars widened into cold distance. Kepler Junction became a shrinking dot behind them, and the shuttle carried her toward a desert world owned by a man she didn't know, toward a life she hadn't chosen. Silt Spire deserved its name. The land was a sweep of rust-red sand and ochre stone, broken by stubborn scrub that clung to mineral-heavy soil like defiance. The sky stayed amber by day, and at night 3 small moons chased one another across a scattered spill of stars. Dorian's ranch sat in a valley between 2 dark mountain ranges. Not the entire span of his holdings, but the heart of them, the residential compound, the equipment yards, the greenhouse dome that glinted like a captured bubble of daylight. "Home," Dorian said as the shuttle settled onto the pad. The word sounded unfamiliar in his mouth, like a tool he hadn't used in a long time. An older human waited on the porch, Marek, Dorian's foreman. By the way, Dorian nodded at him with quiet trust. Marek had skin like tanned leather and a mechanical leg that whirred faintly. When he shifted his weight, his gaze flicked over Selene, with frank curiosity, but not hunger, not contempt. "Guest room set," Marek said. "Got the Vallanti supplements you ordered, boss." Quartermaster had 60 options. "Hope I picked right. The blue-labeled ones," Selene said automatically, then flinched. shocked she'd spoken. Marek grinned. Good. That's what I grabbed. He turned to her, an ease in his posture that made her suspicious. Come on. I'll show you around. Boss is terrible at grand tours. Last time he tried showing someone the place, he got distracted by a drill rig and left them in the sun for 3 hours. It was 90 minutes, Dorian muttered. 3 hours, Marek repeated, unyielding. I was the someone, despite herself. Selene felt her mouth twitch towards something almost like a smile. The house was larger than it looked, rooms branching off a central hall, a kitchen bigger than her family's entire habitat module, windows that opened onto the valley like the world didn't need to be rationed in careful views. Everything was well made but worn functional, lived in, absent of decorative excess. Up here, Marek said, leading her to a room with its own bath and adjustable climate controls. I read Vallanti like it cooler. He tapped the inside of the door where another deadbolt gleamed. Boss had this installed, said to tell you. Nobody has a key but you. Selene touched the metal. Heavy, real. Marek hesitated at the doorway. Dinner's at 1900 if you want it. If not, I'll leave a plate outside. Why is he doing this? Selene asked before she could swallow the words. Marek blinked. Doing what? Being. She gestured helplessly, gentle. He bought me like equipment. Why is he acting like I'm a guest? Marek's face shifted into something thoughtful. Boss has been alone a long time. Lost his wife and kid in the Proxima riots nearly 20 years back. Men like that have options. They can get mean, or they can get careful. He shrugged. Dorian chose careful. Maybe he figures everyone deserves dignity, even when the universe tries to steal it. He left. Selene locked the door. She didn't go down for dinner that night, or breakfast the next morning. On the second day, hunger finally drove her out at noon. The kitchen was empty. A covered plate waited on the counter, beside a note written in neat, surprisingly elegant hand. Eat. You are not a prisoner. The food had been adapted to her needs. Someone had researched Vallanti nutrition, found the right supplements, sourced compatible proteins. Selene ate alone, watching the desert through the window, trying to reconcile this quiet house with the nightmare she'd expected. On the third morning, voices downstairs woke her. Council's talking again, Marek said. Concern threaded. His tone, let them, Dorian replied. They're saying you bought an alien wife like a spare drill head. Says it's bad for human Vallanti relations. A pause. Then Dorian's voice hardened. Since when does the council care about Vallanti relations? Half of them voted against letting Vallanti families buy land. I'm just saying, Marek pressed. People are watching. Then let them watch. Dorian's words landed. With weight, she's my wife. That means she's under my protection. Anyone with a problem can come talk to me. Selene pressed her palm to the door, heart thudding. My wife, not my property, not my purchase. She'd prepared herself for cruelty. She had not prepared for someone who installed locks for her, who fed her even when she hid, who spoke about protection like it was an obligation, not a boast. Kindness was harder to understand than violence. Later that week, Selene found herself outside by the greenhouse dome, drawn by the unfamiliar promise of green under an amber sky. "You're not eating enough," Dorian said from behind her. Selene jumped. She hadn't heard his footsteps. He stood near a row of tomato plants, wiping dirt from his hands. His expression was unreadable, but his voice held no accusation. "The supplements are adequate," she said carefully. "Adequate isn't thriving." He nodded toward her hands. Vallanti wrists show it early. Marek noticed too. "You've been watching me. I've been noticing. A small pause. There's a difference." Selene's throat tightened. "Why did you agree to this?" Dorian's gaze drifted over the plants, as if they could help him choose words. "Day came to me with a proposition. Said your family needed help. Said you were of bonding age. Made it sound clean." His jaw worked. "Then I saw you at the registry. You were scared, not willing." I realized he'd lied. Selene's voice came out thin. "You could have voided it." "I should have," he admitted. "But if I did, the authority would have taken your family's last claims, and you'd have no home. No legal shelter in Terran space. You'd be easy prey on stations, in ports. People vanish there." He looked at her, direct and unflinching. "So I went through with it, not because I wanted a transaction. Because I didn't want to watch you fall through cracks no one bothers sealing." Selene's anger surged, tangled with something else. "So you married me out of pity." "I married you because you deserved better odds." He set down the watering tool. "The door's open. You can leave any time. I'll cover transport. I'll give you enough credits to start over." Selene stared at him, thrown off balance. "You'd just let me go. You're not property, Selene." The way he said her name clean, plain, respectful made her chest ache. "I don't know how to be a wife," she admitted, the confession scraping her pride raw. "Our bonds are ritual, structured. My mother died before she taught me." Dorian's mouth twitched with something like rule. "I don't know how to be a husband anymore. It's been 20 years since I had practice." He glanced around the greenhouse. "Maybe we don't force it. No demands. No expectations. We see what grows." He touched a tomato leaf with careful fingers. "Plants taught me patience. Push to hard. You kill them, ignore them, same result. But give them what they need and wait." His gaze returned to hers. "Sometimes you end up with something worth having." Something shifted in Selene, an unfamiliar loosening, like a fist unclenching. "I'll stay," she said, "for now." Dorian nodded once. "For now works." Time on Silt Spire moved slow. Selene learned the ranch's rhythms. Dorian rising before dawn, coffee black and bitter. A low hum of old Terran songs when he thought no one listened. Morek's gruff jokes and hidden tenderness. The way grief lived in the corners of the house. Like a quiet fourth resident, she learned, too, that the colony town Brickstone was less kind than the desert. The first time she went with Dorian for supplies, humans stared from doorways. Whispers trailed her between aisles. "That's Holden's alien. He bought her like a machine. Paid off a whole family's debt for a wife." Dorian's voice cut through the murmur. "Unless you want to repeat it to my face, keep your mouths shut." Silence snapped into place. People suddenly remembered errands elsewhere. You didn't have to, Selene said in the transport afterward. Yeah, Dorian replied, hands steady on the controls. I did. They'll hate you for it. They already hate me for having land. Might as well give them a reason. That's worth it. Weeks became months. Selene began to speak at the dinner table, then to argue about equipment schedules, then to overhaul the accounting system with relentless efficiency. One evening, Dorian slid a datapad across to her. Company structure, he said. Right now it's just me on paper. If you want, I can list you as operations partner. Equal access, equal authority. Selene stared at the document, pulse skittering. Half your company. I'm offering you a place to stand, he said. A stake in what you're building. We're not partners, she whispered, because saying we are felt like stepping off a cliff. Dorian didn't push. Think about it, she said yes 3 days later. That's when the trouble started with flowers. At first, Dorian left. Practical things outside her door. A Vallanti poetry collection. A thermal blanket rated for her cooler blood. Supplements formulated exactly to the specifications she mentioned once in passing. Then one morning, a vase sat on her table holding real roses, petals soft, fragrant, already beginning to fade. They'll die, she said when she found him in the greenhouse. Most beautiful things do, he replied without looking up. That's a waste. He straightened slowly. My wife used to say temporary things matter more. If something doesn't last, you pay attention while it's here. His gaze met hers, steady as stone. I thought you deserved something. That required care. Selene's throat tightened. Why are you doing all of this? We're already married. Dorian took a breath that sounded like surrender. Because you deserved to be courted, he said. What happened at Kepler was a transaction, not a marriage. He stepped closer, careful, as if giving her space was a kind of reverence. I want you to choose me because you want to, not because the authority says your name is Holden. The honesty in his eyes scared her more than anger ever had. I think I've been choosing you since the day you offered your arm and didn't. Take my hand, Selene whispered. Dorian's voice roughened. I'm terrified you'll heal and leave. If I leave, she said, it will be because I chose that too. He nodded, accepting the blade hidden inside freedom. Then the colony council came. A Tuesday. 3 official transports on the pad. To council representatives, 1 authority officer, and a news drone operator practically vibrating with anticipation. Representative Fenwick stepped forward, wearing the smug satisfaction of a man who enjoyed power for its own sake. Mr. Holden, he said, we've received complaints about your domestic situation. Dorian stood on the porch with Selene beside him. Marek lingered near the equipment shed, hand resting near his sidearm like a reminder. What situation? Dorian asked. The irregular nature of your bond to the Vallanti woman, Fenwick said, smiling thinly. Concerns about coercion, debt manipulation, violations of interspecies bonding regulation. Selene stepped forward. No one is being coerced. Fenwick's gaze slid over her like she was a display unit. Victims often fail to recognize their own exploitation. We're here to protect you. Mrs. Holden, protect me from what? Selene's voice rang across the dusty yard. A husband who treats me as an equal. A home where I have locks for my safety. A partnership where my voice matters. Her inner eyelids flickered, anger turning her blood colder. Where was your protection when my family lost everything? When a broker sold me like salvage? Fenwick's smile soured. Nevertheless, the council will conduct a review. Review this, Dorian said. He reached into his coat and tossed Fenwick a data chip. The man caught it reflexively. What is this? Notarized transfers, Dorian said loudly. Enough for the crowd gathering at the edge of the pad to hear. Yesterday I transferred 40% of my company assets to Selene Tenora Holden. Land rights, claims, equipment, water access, all in her name. Fenwick went still. This is 61 million credits. Dorian met his eyes without blinking. Which means my wife is now one of the wealthiest landholders in Terran colonial space. She doesn't need my money, my protection, or my name. A pause. Then, softer only. Because certainty didn't need shouting. If she wants to leave tomorrow, she can. And she won't be leaving empty-handed. The news drone tilted closer, hungry. Fenwick sputtered. You can't just give my wife independence, Dorian asked. Treat her like a person? The authority officer cleared his throat. Uncomfortable, everything appears legal. Representative. Fenwick's face flushed. He tried to recover control by aiming it at Selene. The alien woman has a name. Selene cut in. It's Selene Tenora Holden. I'm a legal resident of this planet and a property owner. Address me correctly. For a heartbeat. Silence held the yard. Then someone in the crowd laughed warm, approving. Another voice called. Looks like she's doing just fine, Fenwick. Go solve a real problem. Applause scattered like rain on hot sand. Fenwick retreated with wounded pride and threats that sounded hollow. That night, the story lit the colonial feeds. Husband gives millions to alien bride. By morning it had jumped systems. By week's end, strangers argued across a dozen worlds about contracts, consent, and what partnership should look like. Selene watched the coverage from the living room, curled by the window. Dorian sat opposite her, pretending the screen didn't exist. You planned it, Selene said. Dorian's mouth twitched. I might have mentioned the council was sniffing around. You wanted witnesses. I wanted the galaxy to know you were free, he said simply. So no one could rewrite your story. Selene set down her tea and crossed the room. She sat beside him on the worn couch. You ridiculous man, she murmured. I've been called worse. You gave away half your life's work. I gave it to my partner. Selene leaned against his shoulder. He went very still, as if afraid to move and break the moment. I'm done. Deliberating, she said softly. And I choose you. Dorian's hand found hers, calloused and warm. You're sure? He asked, voice unsteady in a way she'd never heard. I'm Vallanti, she said. Smiling, we don't decide. Lightly, she kissed him, then slow, deliberate, a choice made visible. His lips were warm and dry from desert air, and he kissed her back with careful tenderness, like he still couldn't believe he was allowed. Spring came to Silt Spire in copper and gold. Scrub brush bloomed in improbable bursts of orange and pink. Selene's hybrid greenhouse crops thrived vegetables adapted to Terran soil. Resilient and stubborn as she was, the media storm faded, replaced by newer scandals. But its ripples remained. Fenwick lost his seat in a recall election. Vallanti families began inquiring about land purchases on Silt Spire. Human-alien couples across the sector spoke up. Emboldened by the Holden model, the feeds couldn't stop dissecting. One morning, Marek dropped a data pad on the breakfast table. Fan mail. He announced 12 messages to death, threats, 3 marriage proposals. Delete all of them, Dorian muttered into his coffee. Already did, Marek said, but you might want this one. He tapped the screen. It was from Councillor Vero Tanora Selene's father. Selene froze. She hadn't spoken to him since Kepler. She deleted his apologies without reading. The betrayal had been too fresh, too touch. He wants to visit, Marek said, voice careful. Says he needs to tell you something in person. Dorian looked at Selene. You don't have to. I'll never be ready, she whispered. Then, after a breath that tasted like rust and release, tell him he can come. 3 days, 1 night. When Vero arrived, he looked smaller than Selene remembered, older. Shame had bent his posture and carved lines into his face. They sat in the living room, Selene and Dorian together on the couch. Vero in a chair opposite. Marek vanished like he'd suddenly developed urgent work elsewhere. You look well, Vero said. His voice trembled. This world suits you. This man suits me, Selene replied. Vero's gaze flicked to Dorian. Thank you for taking care of her. She takes care of herself, Dorian said. I just try not to get in the way. Something like grief crossed Vero's features. At that sounds like her mother. The mention cracked something in Selene's chest. Why are you here? She asked. Vero clasped his hands until his knuckles whitened. To tell you the truth, he said hoarsely. The whole truth. He swallowed. Cassian didn't approach me. I approached him. Selene's breath stopped. Dorian's hand tightened on hers. I knew we would lose the land, Vero continued, voice breaking. I knew there was no legal way to stop it. I went looking for someone who could arrange an alternative. He looked up, eyes wet. I told myself I was giving you opportunity, security, a future away from that dying rock. But that wasn't the truth. Selene's voice was quiet, sharp. What was the truth? I was afraid, Vero whispered, afraid of losing everything. Afraid of failing you the way I failed your mother because I couldn't afford proper care. And in my fear, I convinced myself that selling you was saving you. Silence filled the room like dust. It wasn't saving, Selene said. It was betrayal. Vero bowed his head. Yes, he glanced at Dorian, shame turning his words raw. The only reason things didn't destroy you is because of his character, not mine. Selene stood and walked to the window. Outside, the amber sky hung wide and indifferent. I've been angry, she said, staring at the valley. Every time I saw your face in mine, I felt sick. Every time I remembered you crying while you signed me away, I wanted to scream. Vero didn't move. He looked smaller still. But anger is exhausting, Selene continued. She turned back, and I found something better to spend my energy on. A home, a future, a partnership built on respect. Her voice softened, not into forgiveness, but into something survivable. I'm not ready to forgive you. Maybe I never will be. But I'm ready to stop hating you. Vero stood slowly, as if his bones had aged in the span of a sentence. He looked like he wanted to reach for her, then stopped himself, understanding that entitlement ended where he'd broken it. It's more than I deserve, he said. Yes, Selene replied. It is. He left the next morning. At the door, he looked at Dorian and whispered, "Thank you for being the man I failed to find for her." "I'm not doing it for you," Dorian said, steady. "I'm doing it because she deserves happiness. I'm just lucky enough to be part of it." Seasons passed. The ranch prospered. The mineral operations expanded under Selene's careful management. Her hybrid crops became a colonial staple. Dorian taught her to ride desert skimmers. She taught him Vallanti poetry and how to sit in silence without turning it into loneliness. On the anniversary of the day she'd chosen him, not the registry date, but the day she'd spoken her choice aloud, they sat on the porch watching the 3 moons rise. "I've been thinking about family," Selene said. Dorian went very still. Like the universe might punish him for hope. Vallanti and humans are genetically compatible. Selene continued. "It's documented. I know." Dorian admitted quietly. "I looked it up months ago. Didn't want to assume." "You researched reproduction," Selene said. Amused. "I research everything," he replied, and there was a smile in his voice. Selene took his hand and placed it over her abdomen. "Our family is about to grow." For a moment, Dorian didn't breathe. Then wonder and terror and joy tangled across his face, and he pulled her close with the desperate gentleness of a man who had once lost everything and never expected the universe to give anything back. "How long?" he managed. 3 months, Selene said. "I wanted to be sure." "You knew for 3 months and didn't tell me?" he asked, half laughing, half shattered. "I was deliberating," she said serenely. "Deliberating? About what?" Selene smiled up at him. "Whether I wanted to share you." Dorian laughed full and warm and kissed her forehead. "You ridiculous woman." "I learned from a ridiculous man," she said. They sat together as the moons climbed. In the greenhouse, tomatoes ripened on the vine. In the valley, machines hummed with the promise of tomorrow. And in the house where fear had once lived, where a trembling bride had locked her door against a stranger love had finally found a home. The galaxy had watched their story play out in headlines and arguments, in outrage and admiration. But the best parts, the quiet parts, the chosen parts, those they kept for themselves.